BRICS continues to grow and grow. Every few weeks, basically, there's a new announcement of another country that has been admitted to BRICS, which is a Global South-led organization that now represents more than 40% of the global economy and over half of the world's population. The latest news is that as of the 17th of January, Nigeria has been accepted as a partner country in BRICS, which means it's on the path toward full membership in the near future. This is very important because Nigeria has the largest population in Africa, and it has the sixth largest population on Earth. The Brazilian government announced this news because in 2025, Brazil is the chair of BRICS. There's a rotating chairmanship every single year. In 2023, it was South Africa. In 2024, it was Russia. This year, it is Brazil. And Brazil has succinctly summarized the goals of BRICS being two main goals: strengthening South-South cooperation and reforming global governance. So when you hear Western critics of BRICS claim that this organization has so many internal problems and they don't have unity and they don't have a common goal, Brazil has constantly stated what those two common goals are: deepening South-South cooperation, economic and political integration of the formerly colonized countries of the Global South, which represent the global majority, and the other goal, reforming institutions of global governance. That means reforming the United Nations, and in particular, the UN Security Council, which is dominated by the Western powers. And above all, it means reforming international financial institutions. In 2024, when Russia was chair of BRICS, it published a comprehensive report detailing its plans, BRICS's plans, to transform the international monetary and financial system. I wrote a lengthy report about that, and I have a video about that, which I will link to in the description below, summarizing the main points of this report. But the gist of it is that BRICS countries have a common economic goal in challenging the dominance of the US dollar and Washington's dominance over the international financial system. And they have proposed as an alternative to US dollar dominance what they call a multi-currency system through what is known as the BRICS Cross-Border Payment Initiative. They're already using their own national currencies to trade with each other, trying to de-dollarize their trade. And they're trying to create new institutions to de-dollarize the reserves they hold in their central banks, holding new assets and also simply gold, because many of these countries are afraid that the US could seize the dollar-dominated assets they hold in their reserves, which is what the US did to Russia and Venezuela and Iran and Afghanistan. And they're even setting up exchanges for commodities so they can settle trade imbalances in commodities like gold or wheat or minerals. And so many countries in the Global South are trying to join BRICS precisely because they want to create a new international financial order, one that is no longer completely dominated by the Western colonial powers that colonized much of the world and still treat many Global South countries as neo-colonies today. So now that Nigeria has been officially accepted into BRICS as a partner, there are 9 BRICS partner countries and 10 full members of BRICS for a total of 19 as of the 19th of January. I created a map showing membership, which you can see here, and I regularly update this map, which you can find the latest updated version on geopoliticaleconomy.com. The previous edition, which was announced just 2 weeks before Nigeria was admitted, was Indonesia. Indonesia has the world's 4th biggest population and the 7th largest economy. And Indonesia's addition as a member of BRICS was also deeply symbolic because Indonesia was one of the founders of the non-aligned movement and previously had hosted the Bandung Conference in 1955, which brought together countries in Africa and Asia that were seeking independence from Western colonialism. So many ways in the 21st century, you can see BRICS as following in the footsteps of the non-aligned movement and the Bandung Conference of the 20th century. BRICS is the 21st century version of that. And again, at the core of BRICS's international movement is the attempt to de-dollarize the international financial system, to create alternatives to the dominance of the US dollar. So the 10 full members of BRICS are now Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, after which BRICS is named. They founded this organization back in 2009 as BRIC, and then South Africa joined in 2010. And then 5 new members were added: Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the UAE. They joined in 2024. And then now there are 9 BRICS partners as of 2025. Those include Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Nigeria, Thailand, Uganda, and Uzbekistan. If you look at a list of the top 20 most populous countries on Earth, 10 of them are now in BRICS, including Nigeria has the 6th largest population, which was over 230 million people as of 2024. That makes it the most populous country on the African continent. So if you combine together the population of all 19 BRICS members and partners, together they represent more than 4.3 billion people, which represents 54.6% of the entire population of the world. This is according to data from the International Monetary Fund, which I used here to create these charts. There are different sources on the size of the world population that differ a little bit, of course, but I typically use the IMF data because despite all of the many problems with the IMF as an institution, its data is publicly available and very useful, and it's also updated very regularly. So the IMF had the world population in 2024 at 7.92 billion people. The BRICS countries are now 4.3 billion people. That means they represent 54.6% of the entire world population. The addition of Nigeria into BRICS is also important because Nigeria has one of the fastest growing populations on Earth. India, one of the founding members of BRICS, which has the world's largest population, has the fastest growing population. From 2024 to 2037, it's expected that there will be 147 million people born in India. But in second place is Nigeria, with 65 million people born in Nigeria in the next decade and a half or so. And if you look at the list of the top 10 countries with the fastest growing populations, not as a percentage, but as a gross number, half of those countries are now in BRICS: India, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Indonesia, and Egypt. So BRICS cannot be ignored. It represents the majority of the world population, and Nigeria in particular is pretty symbolic because the largest city in Nigeria, Lagos, is expected to emerge as the world's top megacity by the end of the 21st century. In fact, by 2100, people in the African continent will represent 38% of the world population, whereas today, people in Africa represent 18% of the entire world population. And also today, people in Asia represent 60% of the world population. Their percentage of the world population is expected to fall to 45% in 2100. So in other words, by the end of the 21st century, more than 8 out of every 10 people in the world will live in Asia or Africa. And BRICS as an organization represents these people who are the global majority. They already are today the global majority, and their majority will continue to increase over time. Yet, unfortunately, many Western governments and politicians and pundits and academics and intellectuals, they still think the entire world revolves around them, around the West, even though the West only represents about 13 or 14% of the world population. And it's not just the population, it's also the economy, because many of the BRICS countries have some of the fastest growing economies on Earth. Of course, China is the world's #1 economy when you measure its GDP at purchasing power parity, and China is the world's industrial superpower. And if you combine together all of the 19 BRICS members and partners, together, their GDP represents 42.2% of the entire world economy. This is the updated version, including Nigeria now as a partner. So as BRICS continues to expand, they get closer and closer to representing half of the entire world economy. Nigeria is also a major economy in the world. It has the second largest economy on the African continent after Egypt, and Egypt is now a full member of BRICS. In fact, if you look at the 5 largest economies in Africa, all of them are either part of BRICS or are going to be part of BRICS. So Egypt is a full member. It's the largest economy. Nigeria is now a partner. It's the 2nd largest economy in Africa. South Africa is, of course, a founding member of BRICS. It's the 3rd largest economy in Africa. Algeria was invited to become a partner country of BRICS at the summit in the Russian city of Kazan in 2024. And it did not officially give a response, but it's likely going to accept the invitation. And Ethiopia was admitted as a full member of BRICS in 2024. So Algeria is the 4th biggest economy in Africa, and Ethiopia is the 5th biggest economy. And although, yes, it is true that many countries in Africa are suffering from very high rates of poverty and underdevelopment, in no small part due to Western colonialism, because they have such large populations, they still have very big economies. So for instance, Egypt, which is the biggest economy in Africa, has a larger economy than Australia. And Nigeria has a larger economy than the Netherlands. And of course, this is all using data that measures GDP at purchasing power parity, which instead of looking simply in nominal terms at exchange rates, which can make Western countries that have very overvalued currencies seem more economically powerful than they actually are, PPP adjusts for the purchasing power of the currencies locally. And when you do so, you can see that Egypt and Nigeria, these BRICS countries, are very big economies. Nigeria is also important because it's the larger producer of oil on the African continent. It's the number 1 producer, and the number 2 producer, Algeria, has also been invited to become a BRICS partner. And if you look at the top 10 largest oil-producing countries on Earth, half of them are in BRICS. That includes Russia, China, Iran, the UAE, and Brazil. And Nigeria is the 15th largest producer of oil on Earth. So another very important part of BRICS expansion is seeing the overlap between BRICS and OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. We've seen that now BRICS countries represent more than 1/3 of global oil production, and that number is constantly increasing as BRICS expands. This means that these countries can have an important role in the global oil market if they collaborate and decide whether or not to increase production or decrease production. Now, the US is now the world's largest oil producer since the shale boom, and that has complicated things with OPEC, despite the fact that OPEC has been informally expanded, becoming OPEC Plus, and Russia has been participating. But the point to take away is that OPEC and BRICS now have a lot of overlap. And essentially what we're seeing is the further political and economic integration of countries in the global south plus Russia. They represent the global majority. And again, yes, they do have many internal political differences, but what drives them together is a series of common interests, including, as Brazil has constantly said, the 2 main goals of BRICS are deepening South-South cooperation, that is political and economic integration, and furthermore, reform of global governance institutions, first and foremost, the international financial and monetary system. And BRICS is trying to de-dollarize, trying to create alternatives to the US-dominated global financial system built around the dollar. So the more countries that BRICS adds, the bigger those countries are, the more unity they have in this goal to try to create a new international financial system, or at the very least to significantly reform the existing institution, although I don't think it's reformable. I think there have to be new institutions, and BRICS is exploring what those new institutions and frameworks could be. And Africa plays a very important role in this as the fastest growing continent, and Nigeria as the most populous country in Africa, followed by Ethiopia as the second most populous country in Africa. These are now both countries that are in BRICS, and many other countries are joining. So I think this is a very important organization that everyone should be following. If you like learning about these massive changes happening in the world, please like and please subscribe. This is Geopolitical Economy Report. I'm the editor-in-chief, Ben Norton. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. I will see you all next time.